The Diablo Range has been a constant in my life. I've lived along Pacheco Pass for the past 20 years, and I grew up east of San Jose on 6 acres where the suburbs met the mountains. Our family didn't travel much, and they weren't especially outdoorsy, so I didn't seem like a likely candidate for a lifelong fascination with nature. I began by exploring that property, lifting logs in winter for salamanders, catching lizards in spring, and watching monarch caterpillars transform on milkweed plants that popped up every summer. Just beyond rose an open ridge rising 2,000 feet above the Santa Clara Valley. It seemed like the edge of the earth. I could scarcely imagine what lay beyond. One day I hiked to the top of that ridge. I vividly remember the profound silence, and I was amazed to see still more mountains and below the deep, dark canyon of the Arroyo Aguague. While Silicon Valley sprawled to the west, looking east I saw a vast landscape with hardly a road or building, fertile ground for a young imagination. Those mountains must have had a name, but no one ever mentioned it. The Diablos might be the country's most anonymous mountain range. Ask someone to name them, even residents, and you're likely to get a shrug. They've never offered much economic bounty. The forests, lacking marketable lumber, have never been logged. Steep slopes and aridity have limited agriculture, and while mining occurred in New Idria, the lack of precious metals spared the Diablo Range from the fate of the Sierra Nevada. Only a couple of thousand people inhabit the interior of the range, scarcely more than at the end of the 19th century. There are a half dozen mountain passes crossing the range, but no road running its length north to south. There's scant recreation as well, a few reservoirs along the periphery, but no one vacations here. For most people, the Diablo Range is something they look at briefly on their way to someplace else, an entire mountain range hidden in plain sight. First impressions can deceive. Drive Highway 5 along the eastern border of the Diablo Range and you'll see monotony, mile after mile of treeless, rolling hills. Robert Frost wrote, "Happiness makes up in height what it lacks in length." To clumsily paraphrase that, I'll say the Diablo Range makes up in diversity whatever it may lack in initial impressions. It's a land of many faces. Besides the quintessentially Californian blue oak woodland and valley oak savanna, its broadleaf forests might have you convinced you were back east, while the ferns and lush understory resemble the Pacific Northwest. The rock formations of pinnacles are reminiscent of the Southwest, while the weathered, arid hills east of New Idria recall the Badlands of the Dakotas. The austere grasslands of the Pinoche Valley would look at home in West Texas, while the chaparral blanketing much of the range hints of Baja California. The pine forests of the higher elevations might lead you to think you were in the Sierra, and the Diablo Range is the only place on Earth with redwood groves and desert dunes, leopard lizards and steelhead, and wildflowers. Every spring is a super bloom somewhere in the range. All those habitats translate to an incredible species mix. San Benito County has recorded over 400 bird species, and Henry Coast State Park's plant list exceeds 700. I couldn't begin to guess the number of insects present, but consider this. Pinnacles National Park has over 400 bee species alone. There have been 61 native mammals documented in the Diablo Range, 47 reptiles and amphibians. How many national parks or wilderness areas can match those totals? Perhaps anonymity has served the Diablo Range well, for it made it into the 21st century mostly intact, a biodiversity hotspot and sanctuary for a host of imperiled species such as kit foxes, yellow-legged frogs, and endemic wildflowers. Like a lot of kids, I was fascinated by dinosaurs. But that long ago world seemed hard to relate to, what with palm trees in Wyoming. I found myself more drawn to the Pleistocene, a world much like ours, minus the heavy hand of humanity. The creatures inhabiting that not so long ago world were some of the most fantastic to ever roam the planet. Regrettably, many disappeared, yet by the time of European colonization, grizzly bears, elk, condors, wolves, pronghorn, and jaguars all called the Diablo Range home. By the time of my childhood, those species had all vanished too. Even mountain lions were on the brink of extirpation following a 56-year bounty program. After an eye-opening trip to Yellowstone, my younger self had his eyes set on living in the Rockies. I never made it to Montana. I hung around, exploring the Diablo Range, my literal and figurative backyard. I became fascinated by range maps and why species were found in some places but not others. Perhaps not surprising for someone lamenting the end of the Pleistocene, I was especially drawn to vanishing species. To me, mankind's original sin was perpetuating extinction. My time outdoors became more focused, revolving around one rare creature or other. I went back to school, got a degree in conservation biology, and looked to apply myself close to home. I worried that the Diablo Range may have been a little too under the radar, so unknown that no one was aware enough to even care. That concern spilled over into a book, the Diablo Diary, which I suppose was my way of channeling that anxiety. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, something amazing happened. Conservation. Condors and elk have been reintroduced, while pronghorn can be seen at the southern edge of the range. In 2021, a wolf left the Sierra Nevada and crossed the San Joaquin Valley, spending time in San Benito County before resuming his wandering ways. Last year, a black bear appeared on a wildlife camera along Pacheco Pass. The resurgence of large, wide-ranging species is welcome news, for it underscores that the Diablo Range is still big enough, still wild enough to serve as a living landscape, a crucial travel corridor and habitat for a host of species, large and small. We live in a society that places a dollar value on everything. But how do you quantify nature's benefits beyond revenue generated through recreation and resource extraction? I don't just mean healthy soil, clean water, and unpolluted air. I mean the spiritual value of a beautiful place. Open spaces, the possibility of experiencing a condor fly overhead, of glimpsing a mountain lion, horned lizards, or wildflower field. Those priceless possibilities have gone largely unrecognized, more anonymous than the Diablo Range itself. That's what's at stake here, our natural heritage. There have long been agencies and advocacy groups doing important work protecting pieces of the Diablo Range. Today is a landmark event, something I never thought I'd witness, connecting those groups for the larger purpose of connecting and protecting the Diablo Range in its entirety. Connection and protection. Those words are the language of hope for wild things and wild places. May we usher in a new and exciting era in which the Diablo Range, anonymous no more, can forever remain a place where children can imagine and people of all ages experience wonder. Thank you.